Welcome for all of you who are watching. You're tuned into TMH and this is our daily English news. Our headlines for today: the UN says that the humanitarian aid that has arrived into the Tigray region is far from what is actually needed. Reports coming out of Eritrean forces today that have executed 19 civilians in Aksum, the same city that these same forces committed a massacre on over 800 civilians exactly 2 years ago today. And the Ethiopian Prime Minister's empty speech at the Internet Governance Forum draws criticism for hypocrisy. As we move on to our main updates for today, the UN says the humanitarian aid that has arrived into the Tigray region remains far from what is needed to meet the huge needs there currently. Spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Stéphane Dujarric made the announcement in his daily media briefing in New York. Let's take a listen.
Turning to Ethiopia, our humanitarian colleagues tell us they have seen some gradual and tangible improvements in access into the Tigray region following the recent cessation of hostilities agreement. Since mid-November, aid deliveries have begun moving into Tigray, including to Mekele along the Samara and Kombolcha corridors, and to other parts of Tigray along the Gondar corridor in Amhara. Humanitarian flights for staff have also resumed for Mekele and have started for Shire as well. From the 15th to the 24th of November, more than 450 trucks carrying aid by the government and by UN as well as NGOs arrived in Tigray. The majority of this is food aid as well as medical supplies and agricultural supplies. Some fuel and cash have also been brought in. However, our humanitarian colleagues stress that what has arrived in Tigray remains far from what is actually needed to meet the huge needs in the area. More than 5 million men, women, and children are in need of food assistance, and an estimated 30% of children are facing acute malnutrition. Sustaining and building on these movements to ensure that the required food and other items can reach all those in need is critical.
Stéphane Dujarric added that Ethiopia is experiencing a historic drought, and in the Bale zone of Oromia, as well as the Liban zone of Somalia region, there's an ongoing cholera outbreak. Nearly 500 people have been affected, including 20 deaths, and hundreds of thousands more have been people remaining at risk as well. There's a report today that on the grisly Aksum massacre anniversary that was committed by the Eritrean forces 2 years ago, Eritrean forces today have executed yet again 19 civilians in the same city. According to Tigrai media, this seems designed to disrespect and inflict maximum pain on Tigrayan civilization. It is to be remembered 2 years ago on this day, Eritrean troops fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray state systematically killed hundreds of unarmed civilians in the northern city of Aksum on the 28th and 29th of November 2020, opening fire in the streets, conducting house-to-house raids, and a massacre that Amnesty International said may amount to crimes against humanity as well. Just Security calls on the AU to establish a criminal accountability mechanism for the crimes that have been committed during this Tigray conflict. Just Security, an online forum for the rigorous analysis of security, democracy, foreign policy, and rights, wrote an analysis titled "The Ethiopia-Tigray Permanent Cessation of Hostilities Agreement and the Question of Accountability for the International Crimes." Timnit Bayru has more details.
Considering the federal government's resistance and hostility to the investigative efforts of the UN Human Rights Council's International Commission, it is commendable that the agreement included a provision on accountability for the horrific crimes committed during the conflict. Just Security notes, however, the provision as drafted is vague and lacks crucial details. Inspiration could have been drawn from the revised agreement on the resolution of the conflict of the Republic of South Sudan, concluded through an AU-supported peace process, which provides a peace model by specifically mandating the establishment of the hybrid court for South Sudan and providing sufficient detail in its mode of establishment, structure, mandate, and jurisdiction, the article stated. Just Security hopes that accountability for the international crimes committed during the Tigray conflict will not be sacrificed at an altar for an easy but negative peace. It stresses that stability could not come at the expense of 6 million lives and potentially countless more. It argued that peace agreements that do not emphasize accountability for crimes committed during violent conflict often unravel partly because of grievances over the lack of accountability or impunity resulting from that of lack of accountability. Just Security advised that it is unwise to leave the crucial task of accountability for the crimes committed committed during the conflict entirely to the Ethiopian government, itself an implicated conflict party. It has added that any hopes of holding accountable perpetrators of serious crimes during the Tigray conflict now lie in an AU-led accountability process, a heavy responsibility that the continental body should not shrink. It urged that the AU take full advantage of its power under the Constitutive Act and establishing a criminal accountability mechanism for the crimes committed during the conflict.
Thank you, Timney. The Ethiopian Prime Minister's empty speech at the Internet Governance Forum draws criticism for the hypocrisy. One observer wrote, "Empty words by a man who used online media to spread hate speech and disinformation encouraging crimes against humanity while preventing aid agencies from using satellite phones or other IT equipment to circumvent as well as the deliberate communication blockout in the Tigray region." The very idea of holding the IGF's annual internet in a country whose leaders imposed the communication blockout on 6 million people has prompted a flurry of criticism targeting the UN body. Abiy Ahmed's regime waged war of genocide against the people of Tigray in total darkness, shutting down the internet phone communication, as well as blocking complete access to any journalists to enter the area for more information as well. As we move on to our final update for today, the Ethiopian regime rewards Maureen Aking, who is an IGAD job for her anti-work at the UN Ethiopia. In October 2021, Maureen Aking and her colleagues at the UN Ethiopia were found engaging in one of the most irresponsible things against Tigrayans and other UN colleagues. In one of the leaked audios, UN Ethiopia representatives said that the evidence on crimes in Tigray must be verified and accepted by the Ethiopian government in order to be deemed credible, and that they hesitate to use any personal testimonies of rape victims as evidence, calling media reports a hype. In a second round of audio leaks, Maureen Aking, IOM Chief of Mission to Ethiopia and representative to the AU, UNECA, and IGAD, said, referring to Tigray, "The TPLF are dirty and vicious, and I will never go back to that region," she says, alleging a request to resettle Tigrayans in Rwanda was for starting a movement with the help of Paul Kagame. Following the leaked audio, she was quietly removed from UN posts in Ethiopia, and observers said Ethiopian authorities, however, didn't forget her service. In May of 2022, Ethiopia's President Sahle-Work Zewde received Maureen in her office and thanked her for her service when she was in the UN Ethiopia, including for her truthfulness, integrity, and dedication. They both talked about the increasing African countries' influence in the UN, and now Maureen has joined IGAD as its representative to the AU, and Tighat reported that IGAD is Abiy regime's playground and that is led by close friends and allies of Abiy Ahmed as well as Warqana Gabayu. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.